cancer, their own guy. So I don't care what Nuke Abe, their present prime minister, may be pushing to the world. No one has gotten sick from Fukushima, and no one ever will. Well, just take a look at the guy who was in charge of, your Tepco, your Tokyo Electric Power Company. You're a big shareholder. You're number one shareholder in it now. The guy's dead from cancer. Hello? So they're in control, Alex. They don't have... we don't have InfoWars at our disposal on mass media. If mass media paid attention to this like I did after it first happened and stayed on it like they should have, but they're captured. They're all captured by the nuclear industry from the top down, from your commander-in-chief right on through to the head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. It's all a money-making
That's right.
charade.
That's right. Their propaganda is so good. Of course, the Ronald Reagan's nuclear-powered, last time I checked. And, I've always been a pro-nuclear power guy because, I believe we need energy. The problem is none of them work these things right. They build them on fault lines. When they blow up, they don't even seem to care. They're not even trying to fix it. There's just this attitude that they're in control of the BS machine so they can lie to themselves and everybody else, but they're not in control of the reactors. The laws of physics will not respond to Tepco's bull. So where is the lawsuit going, and how do we support you guys?
Okay, here's where it's going. We're refiling before February 6th is the deadline that Judge Janice Sammartino afforded us to file our second amended complaint in federal court in San Diego. We had 51 victims. We expect to double that figure of record. And we've been contacted by probably 250,000, 250. 250 victims, but there were, as you mentioned at the top of the program, thousands involved in this. Now, there's a latency period, as we know, but we have filed on behalf of all John and Jane Does who participated in Operation Tomodachi to preserve their rights so that they can file a claim in the future when something arises. With Steve, we know what's happened. With several others, unfortunately, it's the same scenario or beyond. Constantly bleeding from your butt or from gynecologically, and you're a young person, and not at 21 you lose one of your testicles. So we're going to push this forward. As you mentioned, Congress is going to get a report back from the Undersecretary of State in charge of this by April 15th, but we're not waiting for them because where have they been?
And by the way, folks, for those that don't know, radiation attacks fast-growing cells. So your gums, your intestinal lining, and sailors across the board that were part of the operation have been reporting bleeding from their rear ends. So just understand, this is not a game. That means you've got serious radiation sickness. And what makes me mad is they didn't tell people take iodine from what I read. Perhaps the sailor can correct me. But why not tell them to take iodine? Why not tell them now that there's things like Prussian blue and things that could help strip this out of your body, or chelation? I mean, why were you told any of this, Lieutenant Simmons?
They don't want to admit that there's a problem. It's denial. It's denial.
No, it's like telling the first responders, don't wear respirators, the air is fine on World Trade Center. I mean, it's beyond just not caring and covering up. They actively don't want you to get any aid or protect yourself. I'd be saying, go down 1,000 feet in the water. You don't need a mask or a tank. You don't need air down there. I mean, it's just... Go back to that briefly. So they never told you to protect yourself from radiation. You had a wonderful... Well,
they also...
I'm sorry, Steve. I just want to say this to Alex. Glenn Troltz, your guy who you had on the other day, Glenn Troltz, who got measured for cesium. He's got cesium in his body. How much cesium do you think Steve Simmons has in his body?
Well, you must be a listener. Yeah, we had one of our crew on who had his blood tested because he moved from California because he was sick. He had very high levels of cesium that they said was from Fukushima in the major medical report from a major medical lab in Chicago where his blood was sent. And exactly, we need to get the test of your whole crew. It's just amazing. So to be clear, Lieutenant Steve Simmons, who was on the Ronald Reagan aiding through the plume right there at Fukushima, You guys you were miles away and responded when the tsunami hit and then came in. Tell us about, I was reading that you guys were told that there was increased radiation, but then when it started going up and up and up, they said don't worry about it and stop testing?
Honestly, that's new information to me. That is not information that I was purview to, I should say.
Sure. What about iodine? Did they tell you to take potassium iodine?
The only individuals that were taking the potassium iodine were those directly involved with flight ops, those going ashore, and potentially some of those that were working on the deck, but that was it. The rest of the crew, nothing. So you're talking a crew of about 5,500 people, and a small amount of them were working on the deck or actually going ashore.
And by the way, you're living in and around a nuclear reactor on the ship, because that's a nuclear-powered carrier, right?
Correct.
Okay, so did they not have enough potassium iodate or iodine for you, or what happened?
I'm quite sure they had plenty. However, they're going off of misinformation being fed to them from Japan and from Tokyo Electric. So when Tokyo Electric and Japan gives the false sense of security that everything is fine and you guys are safe to operate in such a... The
military bought that. Yeah, stay there. I want to do 5 more minutes with you guys and have some closing comments, but talk about what did Fukushima look like blowing up? What was it like? Did you see the tsunami come in before? I mean, what was it like? You're an eyewitness to so much of this. It's amazing. Lieutenant Steve Simmons and his lawyer are with us.
We're on the mark.
Shows that, and they said, well, humans are cheaper than monkeys. So that's the attitude. And look, I don't want to do testing on monkeys either. I have empathy. What you'll do to a little animal, you do to somebody else, but it's like everybody cares about the animals but not the people. And it's just another story. Oh, the sailors got radiated and they're bleeding out their hind ends and their teeth are falling out and their hair is falling out. And, yeah, there's 14-fold radiation increase in San Francisco on the beach. I mean, big deal. Let's not even investigate that. And there's this attitude that you've got like 3 heads or something if you care. So I care about this because it shows the mindset of the establishment. It shows that the sky's the limit more and more, and they've got these pilots, people on the flight deck. I mean, this is coming out in the news, and no one will give them treatment. No one will pay for it, at least the New York Post, who I was critical of earlier. They reported on this. Guys, closing comments, Attorney Paul Garner and Lieutenant Steve Simmons. I mean, how's your radiation sickness now? Has it gotten better or worse? You got to catheterize yourself. What's happening to your buddies? How many people have joined the suit?
Well, for me, the latest thing, obviously, is now that I have to catheterize every 4 hours.
Good God.
I'm also 100% wheelchair dependent.
Good God.
I've lost my mobility there, and, it's just, I take one day at a time. And, up until recently, I really haven't talked to anybody else who has been dealing with any sort of ailment, at least where I'm located. There's one individual that I've come across who's also dealing with some issues of his own as well. And then, of course, there are the other individuals, all the other individuals that have come forward to Paul.
Well, RT reports 71 sailors, many in their 20s, are filing in the lawsuit that your lawyer's heading up. Is that correct, Paul?
More. Hello?
Yes, sir. I'm just thinking about this situation. Any other points?
The situation is this. We've barely scratched the tip of the iceberg. You're so right in your analysis. They sent the Reagan up to Bremerton for 1.5 years to try to take out the radiation from a lot of components. They shipped it all over to Hanford to bury it over there. They sent the Reagan back to Coronado. Then when somebody says, hey, you shouldn't have little school kids going on for field trips on the Reagan, there's probably radiation on it, they determine, oh, we'll send it back to Japan and we can cook it some more. So what I would suggest to you is this. Have your listeners consider a study that was done back in 2003. Past exposure to densely ionizing radiation leaves a unique permanent signature in the genome, and that was David J. Brenner you probably know him, out of Columbia University.
Yes.
The Center for Radiological Research. They teamed up with the Russians, and they studied all the people from Chernobyl, and they actually isolate down to the chromosome level what damage was done by radiation as opposed to other environmental hazards that we all confront. So this is going to burst their Fukushima Gate balloon, because once the people in the know step forward and say, no, enough of this BS, this causes unique permanent damage to our genomes. We're talking about survival as a race, okay? We're talking about survival of the west coast of California and beyond. Just wait until the people up in Malibu have all that radioactive debris land on their shores this year, and the phones ring off the hook at Barbara Boxer's office and congressmen down here and everyone, what are you going to do about this now?
Well, it really worries me that the establishment could care less about anything but partying all the time with their underage pages. I mean, it is frightening to know the type of weapons these people have, because the honorable folks are the low-level military and police and the general public compared to the people running things. I guess historically we've got a bunch of Caligulas and Neros and on power trips. You know, I empathize with what's going on with you, Lieutenant Steve Simmons, and I hope you get better. I mean, has the VA told you about any treatments that can try to get the radioactive isotopes out of your body, or have those already broken down? I mean, what's your prognosis?
Game. That's what they are, and they got to be compensated. Let me just tell you this, okay, and I'll shut up. Mangano and Sherman, Doctors Joe Mangano, the Nuclear Project, and Jeanette Sherman underscore how small amounts of anthropogenic radiation are lethal and crippling over the short and intermediate term. Human immune systems cannot thrive with permanently damaged thyroid function. You take it from here, Tomodachi.
Yeah.
Well, that's well said. Go ahead.
To answer your question, has the VA mentioned anything about it? In fact, nobody has. Nobody's even, due to the fact that nobody's acknowledged that radiation has had anything to do with my failing health, nobody's even talking about potential treatments or anything of that nature. And, in fact, I've actually had, aside from the intern who gave me his comment about if it was radiation, I would have seen symptoms long before I did, I've actually had, no kidding, a doctor say, well, maybe you're better off not knowing what this is. So at what point do I give up all hope with doctors? And, I don't know. I don't know where to go from there.
We have a bunch of insane scum running things. Look at the GMO crops. Look at the fluoride in the water. They are killing us. And overwhelmingly, it's to reduce population. That's their rationalization. But in the final equation, they're just a bunch of mismanaging, bumbling boobs who endanger our entire civilization. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on with us. I want to ask your lawyer, Paul Garner, if he'd like to give out his legal website, or Steve, if you'd like to give out any contact info for yourself or others that might want to talk to you.
Sure. We would invite your listeners or others to contact us at FukushimaRadiationVictims.net. It's spelled FukushimaraDiationVictims.net, and we'll be happy to interact with you. And my personal email is pcg@garnerlaw.com.
All right, well, good job.
NERLAW.com.
Good job, Mr. Garner.
Thank you, Alex, for shining a spotlight on this, and we'll keep you posted. And I know that I've reached out to Glenn. I want to speak with him about where he was during the 3 years before he got tested, where he lived and where.
Sure, thank you. We'll do that. And then Steve Simmons, anything else?
Nope. I mean, obviously my big concern is that making sure that answers come and that the young sailors and Marines are all taken care of.